What's up, guys? IllumiGnostic here, and in this live stream, I am going to try to give you some stuff that you can use. In fact, there is no try, there's only do. I am going to give you some stuff that you can use. Spirituality and magic and, the idea of expanded consciousness and all of the things that kind of fall under this header are plagued with misconceptions, superstitions, and just general cheesiness. That's why I called this live stream Magic and Spirituality, Hold the Cheese, Please. Because, you just talk to people and look around the world and, you see a lot of foolishness. You see a lot of stuff that's obviously ridiculous. You see things that are downright insane. The consequences of religion, people being trapped inside of, parameters that are dictated to them by doctrines that are obviously were originally intended to be mythological, that are, being taken seriously. And, you see a lot of people with a lot of regret over the years. I just left the Mormon church, or I was dabbling in black magic for years until I realized I was actually just standing in the woods talking to myself and it was doing nothing. And you know what I mean? And all sorts of just wasted time, energy lost in the void. When the energy is not channeled productively, it is just steam lost in the void and nothing comes of it, And the reality is it doesn't have to be that way. You can use common sense and critical thinking and analysis and a basic understanding of ancient principles that were left to us by, we have no idea who really. I mean, some people blame Hermes Trismegistus, who was not probably a real person. Thoth, who people accuse of possibly even being an Atlantean. I have even suspected that this might be one case of actual contact with an interdimensional being. But then at the same time, anyone that's really going to be honest with themselves has to admit that we don't know if interdimensional beings are actually interdimensional beings or if they are just parts of our own subconscious. I even saw Bashar recently, I think today actually, admitting that the being that he claims to channel is quite possibly just part of his own mind. And of course, he's not being sincere on any level, just for the record. He's just repeating what Aleister Crowley said about Aiwass. And in this interview, he was repeating it almost word for word, because that's what this guy does. He repeats the Kabbalion, and he repeats dumbed-down versions of Crowley's work, and he says the thing that will get you to buy his books and come to his talks, which is basically that the alien is teaching him how to teach you to use the law of attraction to get whatever you want just by thinking about it. And now we have arrived at sort of the crux of the apostrophe, the real heart of the matter when it comes down to ideas about magic and how it's sold to people, and truth versus fiction. And it's, you have to have realistic expectations about anything if you want to be productive at it. Obviously the universe, at least to my eyes and to my wits, is not just a bunch of blind deterministic gobbledygook with no rhyme or reason or sense or intelligence, somehow integrated into it. But at the same time, it seems really, really painfully obvious that there is no sky god directing events and taking care of the chosen people and all of that sort of thing. I had a friend recently tell me that he thought RFK could somehow overcome the obstacles of the rigged voting system in the United States, and because he knows how to call on higher powers. And, how many parents are praying that their stage 4 toddler is, gonna get a reprieve from this higher power. We have to look at these things and actually have the courage and the strength and the integrity to be honest with ourselves about, the real limits, and the real potentials of these things. The double slit experiment, that is being reframed in all of these absurd ways and regurgitated I mean, there are new videos about this that have found some new way to kind of spin it. So it's really saying the same false thing in a different way, so that it's because, people have run out of stuff to regurgitate. But, the idea that's generally sold behind that is that it's consciousness that causes the particle to determine what it's going to do. And the reality is you can measure it with a machine and it'll still collapse. And that is one little fact that almost all of these new age gurus that are selling these kind of ideas withhold, and I am not saying for a single second that consciousness doesn't have some ability to potentially influence our experience in non-ordinary ways. Obviously, I'm a person that believes in the possibility of transcendental consciousness and the potential powers. There's all sorts of weird stuff in the world of physics that tells us that we may have different versions of non-ordinary causality, right? For example, Bell's equations show very clearly, and these are not like disputed equations. This is very widely accepted stuff, that any quantum experiment should affect the Big Bang, and that would have ripples that could affect, the past and the future. This could explain the Mandela effect. It would also mean that every thought, every action, every experience that we have also would be changing the Big Bang. So, there are all these possibilities that are presented by different elements of the universe. The thing is that I think we are predisposed to wishful thinking, and we really want to believe in things that allow us to short circuit our limitations and give us shortcuts and ways around not having enough talent or not having enough skill or not having enough money. And the problem with all that is that what actually ends up happening is that you will put energy, you will put consciousness into these avenues that don't go anywhere. And then instead of actually being productive and making progress, you're really just wasting your time. And so that's what I am hoping to offer you in this live stream. I don't know how we could possibly only have 2 people, 9,000 subscribers, you guys, and 2 people. I'm so tired of being shadow banned. Please do hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on PayPal or, whatever. It's just, it's really getting to feel a bit futile. Speaking of, the fact that our consciousness has a limited ability to override, certain aspects of our reality. And it sounds like I've been poo-pooing the idea of magic and consciousness so far, and I'm actually not. But what we have to do is understand what it really is versus what we would like to imagine that it is. And what it really is, if you look at magicians that actually have power, that actually have accomplished things, versus, a guy I know of on the internet, I'm not going to name names, but he's literally selling amulets that are supposed to be imbued with black magic that, that he spins as a very positive influence on the world, which is just, maybe he never learned what black magic is supposed to be or something. I don't know what's going on there. This is something I've seen a few times. Even Aleister Crowley said, people accuse me of being a black magician, but I can't imagine that there are actually people out there that are ignorant and base enough to actually try to do it. So, as wicked as that guy could be, he was like, this is just a dumb joke, black magic is just like, how could you, anyways, but the amulets are supposed to help you to bring fortune and increase your manifestation power. And half the time this dude's crying about how he has no money and things are going wrong and he's losing his mind and all this shit. And people are still buying this stuff. Obviously not enough, but you know what I mean? We have to be realistic, or else you get sucked down one of those dumbass rabbit holes. And, what do you need that for? That's just not, it just blows my mind how many people can, and that's just an example. People look this stuff in the face where there's all these massive, obvious reasons why things are obviously not true, and they just run with it anyways because they would like to. So here's the reality. The people that have actually been successful at this, the people that live at least free lives, like myself, but people like, the Freemasons, and others like them that have actually done stuff that also use magic, what you come to find out is that there's actually no woo really involved. That it's actually about understanding the laws of the universe and learning to work with them and to relate to them in ways that allow a level of mastery to be expressed that appears to be magic to the profane. That's what it really is, How's it going, Bob? And that's not all it is. Obviously I have experienced a lot of things that are not really possible to explain away in the, abject materialist sense or whatever it is. But we have to remember to avoid belief where it's actually conjecture. That's the difference, I feel like part of what wisdom is, that unfortunately tends to develop over a lot of decades, and sometimes there's a lot of enthusiasm and not enough wisdom. Rich too young, wise too late is a very common circumstance. I'm definitely a person that was extraordinarily guilty of that because I did exactly what I'm describing here. I realized that there was some truth and some reality to these things. Ego got a little bit inflated and you ascribe more power to them. You're too eager to believe it. You interpret the evidence as absolute proof when it really only represents possibilities. So that's what I'm saying. We have to divide what we absolutely know for sure against the things that are, conjecturally possible. They're just maybes, like the idea of disembodied incarnate spirits or, some sort of God or, all of these things that no matter what you think, like you might believe that you can come to absolute knowledge of reincarnation. But people that think like that don't understand what their mind is. They don't understand that subjectivity is nothing. Its subjective belief is absolutely nothing. It doesn't mean anything. So, real wisdom is being able to remember that about your own ideas and beliefs, right? I've talked about this many times in the past, but it's worth repeating that, I've had some experiences that suggest very, very strongly of a specific past life down to, actual evidence. And this is another big thing about how, magic was really traditionally done in the mystery schools and the fraternities where there were strict processes and there were rules of engagement and there was protocol and people were anal about it. And, it still happens to this day. And it's just the difference. It really makes the difference between a legitimate initiate and an adept working towards something meaningful and a new ager with wind whistling through their ears. You know what I mean? It's why people refer to it as scientific illuminism, because, the protocol and the approach is very similar to science. And of course it should be. You got to take your same skill set that you use to navigate the physical world and your real life into the realm of spirit and consciousness and all of that sort of thing. I feel like I kind of got off track there. I was heading somewhere specific. But it really is just a very convoluted subject, So, okay, let's talk about the phases of this, because one of the things that I'm noticing the most is that people are really eager to engage in spiritual bypassing. Christianity basically is 100% based on, the popularity of it is derived from the fact that it offers this spiritual bypassing. You don't have to do any real work on yourself. They say you do. You should be a good person and love your neighbor as you love yourself. Not one of them does that. Maybe one somewhere. I haven't met them, but they might say it, but they don't actually do it. If people did that, it's true that the world would be perfect and Jesus would have saved us, right? If people would actually do that, then it could be a self-fulfilling prophecy and actually have some substance. But as you can see, not really what's happening. But the idea that someone else can suffer for you, that someone else can take on the burden of your sins, so you don't have to do anything. You just give your shit to Jesus, and then now you're off scot-free in heaven. That's the ultimate spiritual bypassing. And the level of spiritual toxicity, what that actually does to people is it negates their growth. It negates any possibility that they have of actually having a real spiritual experience and spiritual growth. It's downright satanic. It really is. It's really why, that's one of the main reasons I consider it like absolutely the worst of the worst. It's pretty bad. But yeah, the spiritual bypassing is very tempting for people. And if you look at like the pop culture phenomena of spirituality, you see a lot of people that are focusing on what they're going to be in the future and who they may have been in a past life. But what are they not doing? Looking at themselves in the here and now. That's what they're not doing. That's like the universal thing. Oh, I might have been this in a past life, and in the future I'm going to manifest this, and I'm going to this, and I'm going to that, and I'm going to this, and there's going to be a new earth, and blah, 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 blah. Well, what about right here, right now? Everyone says it. You have to be in the present moment, but I used to be Cleopatra. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying it's not interesting to contemplate who we may have been in past lives, but again, when it comes to that type of accomplishment, there's actually a protocol and there's a dialogue with the universe that must be developed and established. And there is an integration of hemispheres of the brain that has to happen. And there's activations of parts of the brain that are normally dormant. And there's all this work that goes into it over decades. And of course, now we have people doing past life regressions, and all they do is size you up, maybe ask you some questions if you're really dumb enough to tell them stuff about you so that they can tell you what you want to hear more easily, because that's what is going on. And they figure out what you want to hear, and they tell you were that in a past life. And then usually they'll also tell you that there's a spirit attached to you. And because you want to believe the first thing that they told you, you're invested now in the idea of the spirit. And now there's more money you have to pay to get the spirit disconnected. This is where parasitical entities come from, that they literally created it to make money off of people. And we're getting off the subject again, but that is really the first phase of spiritual growth. And I'm not saying all this just to hate on people. I really genuinely hope to contribute to a positive movement and the positive evolution of the consciousness of the human race, and whoever I can reach, whoever I can affect, and the reality is that this stuff is getting in the way. And the first phase of spiritual growth and development is self-knowledge in the here and now. It doesn't matter who you were in a past life or what you think you're going to manifest in the future. What you have to know is who you are, why you are that person, where that person came from, what is in the way of that person, what serves that person and does not serve that person, what can actually be changed, and what has to be just, the relationship altered. Because there are certain realities about who we are. And if a person fancies themselves to be a rock star when they're actually an author, you're just going to make a fool out of yourself your whole life. And if you are actually a painter, but you are pressured into becoming a doctor, you're going to be both unhappy and unsuccessful in medicine. So one must have objectivity and clarity and the courage to confront oneself on the level of the actual plane of fucking reality. And there are huge reasons for this, because once you get to the point where you can actually amplify your will and you can influence the chain of events to conform to your will, if you have not, say, dissolved your self-sabotaging complex, you're going to destroy everything you can create faster than you can create it. And I did that myself. That's why I know this stuff, And here's the solution to it. For example, basic psychoanalysis analysis is something anyone can learn. This isn't something I'm making up. This protocol has been part of like the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. If you read Israel Regardie's stuff, Socrates was telling people to know themselves. Crowley's thing was, of course, that you have to obtain knowledge and conversation with the holy guardian angel. And a lot of people overlook this, but Crowley actually said towards the end of his life that the spirits of the Goetia are just parts of the human mind. So when he talks about the holy guardian angel, it's not, he doesn't actually mean that it's a disembodied spirit that's separate from you. It's just the highest expression of your consciousness. And it's possible that because time is not, as Crowley would have said, but because time is nonlinear, and this isn't mystical conjecture, time being nonlinear is actually, physics supports that. It is possible that this higher self does exist continuously, and that, we have access to that aspect of ourselves at all time. So, it's possible for us to relate to these ideas without even having to invoke things that could be imaginary, or, you know what I mean? We can stay well within the realm of the plausible and still entertain these kind of possibilities. But no matter who you're looking at, when you're talking about, the greatest minds in philosophy and mysticism, knowing yourself is the first commandment. It is the first order of business before you can really do anything meaningful, before you can have even any level of contentment with yourself. This is really the philosopher's stone. This is the key to happiness and peace and a life well lived, because if you have self-knowledge, then you have purpose. And if you have purpose, then you no longer are adrift in a sea of chaos, dangling over the mouth of the abyss, the maws of the abyss, with the teeth of Choronzon, the demon of confusion, gnashing at your shoelaces. You have purpose, you have direction, you have a reason. And so, you don't question anything, and you always know what to do. You always know what to do. But what I was going to give you guys is an example from my own life of how I was mostly able to figure out what this self-sabotaging is about. And it'll demonstrate for you, in case you're not really aware, like a really basic fundamental approach to psychoanalysis. And it's the same principle as the Hansel and Gretel, I think, had this problem, or maybe not. The witch casts a spell, and then they realize that the spell's been cast, and that's enough to break the spell. Or you're asleep, and you realize you're asleep, and you wake up. That sort of thing. Same thing can happen when you're in your waking life, where you realize that you're asleep, and then a waking sleep, and then you wake up some more, and then it becomes a lucid dream in the same way that, you lucid dream when you're actually sleeping. And it's necessary to go through this process that I'm describing first, which is to figure out what is in your way. And the only thing that's usually in your way is you. And in my case, I would manifest apparently the most ridiculous, improbable, I would manifest things regardless of the ridiculously improbable nature of the thing. And I would usually find out that the pieces were already in place before I even realized that I needed them. But I would inevitably destroy it, or walk away from it, even literally leave whatever the situation was, or, and I knew after a while that I was doing that. I was aware of it. But that doesn't change the nature of the hell of it. So I started thinking backwards. And what you have to do is, when you catch yourself in one of these moments of self-sabotage, or whatever your flavor of this is, whatever your toxic trait, and I'm talking about self-destructive toxicity in this case, But, you start thinking backwards and you work backwards down the number line. Because, the binary system is isomorphic. It's the same in both directions. I don't know if you guys saw the meme I posted the other day where if you start with 1 times 9 and add 8, and then you keep adding the number so that they go in opposite directions. Down at the bottom, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times 8. And then on the other side, it's all the same number. You'd have to see it. I can't explain it. But it's this symmetry that exists in your life until you have an awareness of the patterns that are informing the future, right? There's an isomorphic symmetry that is going to be there until you rearrange the past, at least in terms of having an understanding of it. And so I realized that I thought all the way back to this Pinewood Derby that I did when I was a Boy Scout. My dad and I built this Pinewood Derby car. What's up, Johnny? And I was winning by like a long margin, and right at the finish line, I jumped out of the car rather than pulling the brakes. I mean, in my mind, I was thinking, oh my God, it's going too fast. I'm scared. So I jumped out of it. So I didn't win the race. And that I realized was, that was pretty early. But that led me to this realization that I, for some reason, felt like I didn't deserve things. So as soon as I had that thought, I was transported back to maybe 4 or 5 years old, sitting in the car with my mom, who was a completely batshit insane single mom. So life was really difficult for her. She didn't have a lot of money. She let my little brother's father chase away my father when I was a kid. He didn't have any money, so she got $100 a month for child support or something. You know what I mean? So she didn't have any money, but she was insane, so she didn't deal with things well. And we pulled up to this gas station, and I was like, "Mommy, I want some ice cream." And she screamed in my face, like blood red, and like just this insane. I mean, when she would do this, it was like just this furious anger. "You don't deserve ice cream," and she would make her voice as nasty as she possibly could. And, it was just horrible. And of course, with that kind of emotional charge underlying it, I really believed it. And that was the earliest occasion of this that I could remember. But it occurred to me in that moment also that there were earlier instances of the same type of, influence. Amongst other things. I mean, I also remembered around that period that my father told me that our last name was cursed, and so everything that we would do was doomed to failure. And of course, this was just a really pathetic excuse that he gave himself for failing things. But as a 4-year-old, 5-year-old, 7-year-old, every time he got drunk and I heard this, I believed it. Our name is cursed. So, everything we do is doomed to failure. So, you have this latent respect for the father. So I felt obligated to fulfill his dipshit superstition. That he said it happened actually. And this is kind of interesting because we were from the Isle of Man, and Freemasons cursed the family name because my great-great-grandfather got into an argument with Freemasons over something, and supposedly we're still blacklisted from the Isle of Man to this day. But I didn't have any trouble joining the Scottish Rite, regardless of my name. So I don't know if I believe the story. At any rate, though, you know what I mean. Once I came to realize and understand those things, the power that influence had of self-sabotage and self-destruction and feeling unworthy and all of that dissolved. Unfortunately, I had already walked away from all of these major accomplishments that I had created before they could fully come to fruition, because I would reject anything because I'm fulfilling this prophecy of my father and the unfortunate influence of my mother. And so the objective is, and the necessity of this is that if you do not do this before you develop power and influence, even if you manage to manifest things, even if you manage to use the law of attraction, even if you manage to summon a demon and it turns out that it is, it speaks the truth, it's not going to matter. And so, these steps are essential. And this is another reason that the syncretic approach is so essential and so powerful and so necessary, especially considering the complexity of our modern life, all of the influences that have come to bear on us. I often say that it's possible that we wouldn't need psychedelics quite as much as we do if it wasn't for the culture and the complexity and intensity of the unnatural influences that have, created these dissonance patterns. It seems to me that our mind is an antenna. It's loaded with magnetite. Light seems to be the source of our consciousness. When we look at all the religions and Buddhism and all the stories of God and all this stuff, it's either literally light or figuratively light, and we're told that it's eternal, and literally the only thing that we know of in the universe that is eternal is a photon. So, it's pretty obvious that our consciousness comes to us from the light. And the light travels about in an electromagnetic field, and our brains are loaded with magnetite. So what do you think is going on there? So if you are going to interface well with the incoming and outgoing signals into this electromagnetic field, and you got to understand this, there is no woo. There is no woo. There is no such thing. All of the woo is all nonsense. It's not that we can't do things that science doesn't understand, but there is a way that they work. There's some kind of mechanistic basis behind literally everything, or it's not real. That's, when I was talking earlier about how there are really easy ways to ascertain what is woo, what is not plausible, and what is likely, even if it's not provable. You can get really good at this. And one of the ways that you do that is by developing a profound understanding of natural law and the sciences, because that's what you're dealing with. Whether you're talking about spirituality and consciousness or a particle acceleration chamber, it's all the same. It's all the same. So, these dissonance patterns that we have, self-sabotaging tendencies, not bipolar, but borderline personality disorder, narcissism is super common. We have all of these, complexes and trauma complexes and all of this stuff that has to be brought into homeostasis before we can really step into our true power and realize our potential. And one of the ways to understand that is that we are trying to become a hollow tube to bring down fire from heaven, which is a way of saying that we have to remove the dissonance patterns because our antenna has to be able to receive a clear signal. It really is that simple, And so we have the synergistic, syncretic system of drawing on all of these different disciplines and techniques. We have modern psychology, we have Jungian psychoanalysis. We can learn at least the fundamentals of the best schools of thought in that regard and develop a mindfulness practice. And now we have an advantage over the ancients, and the ancients were able to design a symbol like the yin yang that turns out that is exactly what entangled photons at the moment of entanglement, that's exactly what they look like. You know what I mean? And also, they knew about light, obviously. It's eternal. It's omnipresent. The only thing in the universe that's eternal is a photon, and matter is light in a standing wave, and there are photons everywhere in the universe, really, except for maybe in dark matter. But, they're permeating everything, even where they're spread out very thin, and it is apparently dark. It's not absolute. You know what I mean? It's omnipresent. It's omniscient. It's eternal. Obviously, all those references to the divine consciousness were references to light. So the ancients knew a lot. The reality is that we have more potential to go farther now than they did then, because we have access to physics. We have access to psychology and psychoanalysis and all of these different psychedelics and technology. The problem is that we're so disordered. We're so out of sync. We have been so badly polluted, deranged even, distracted, that we are not necessarily utilizing all of the components that could really catalyze our consciousness to the place that it authentically deserves to be. Its true status. Our true status, our true fate, our destiny has been stolen from us by people that really don't seek to do anything interesting. That's one of the saddest things, I think, about the current trajectory and past trajectory of, Babylon, the white man's world, whatever you want to call it, the modern world. Asians are just as guilty as Caucasians, so I shouldn't call it the white man's world, but you know what I mean. The modern, that mess, Babylon, probably is the best nomenclature for it. The people that are doing the oppressing and the suppression and the manipulation and coercion and distortion and the politicol shitstorm, the political system, they're not even that cool. If they were exploiting everyone so that they could have like the most incredible interdimensional experiences, or it still wouldn't be right, but at least you can kind of understand. But it seems to me that they just usurp all the power and then they're just lame as fuck. What is the point? It's just such a waste. Might as well allow the human race to express to its highest and truest potential. And that's really why I'm here, why I'm talking to you guys. And what really motivates me is large part the loss of a lot of my own potential, because I had to contend with the influences that compelled my parents to be, fuck ups and not have any knowledge of themselves and psychology and all of these anger issues and all, what I mean? That whole mess of poverty and ignorance and the whole thing, and they passed that on to me because of the influences of the culture. And not because they were fundamentally defective at birth. And, I have the honor and obligation of neutralizing that current so that it doesn't continue through the generations, the whole idea of healing your lineage and neutralizing. So that's great, but I would have rather that I didn't have to go through that. It would have been a lot more productive. And I can't even imagine what it might have been like if, not only myself, but myself and other people like me, which is almost everyone, I think, in terms of, having societal influence that curtails and retards our development. What might we be doing? What might we have accomplished? What might this world look like at this point? The cost of this has been truly extraordinary, and I know no one really needs to hear that, but I think maybe what we do need is to be reminded of it, of the necessity and the importance of taking these lessons to heart in the present moment and really remaining committed and mindful about transcending them and, really committed to vigilance, unwavering vigilance, which is difficult. I think when we look around at the world nowadays, we see a lot of almost insurmountable obstacles and looming threats, and a chaostrophe threatening to wash over the walls and destroy us all, enslave us all, whatever. I mean, it doesn't look promising out there. So, I have empathy for myself and for other people that are having trouble not becoming apathetic, not falling prey to cynicism, because it is hard to imagine people suddenly overcoming their political indoctrination, their religious indoctrination, and people, that have totally accepted the materialist, determinist paradigm in an inflexible way. I have to be careful how I say that, because I have accepted the materialist, deterministic paradigm to an extent. It's just that it's not that the process is incorrect. It's not that you should believe things without evidence. It's not that there isn't a way to understand all the phenomena in the universe. But this incredible level of arrogance where we think that science has it all figured out. People that believe that there are no holes in the evolutionary theory, which, by the way, if you haven't seen Michael Levin's work, you definitely need to go check that out, because, most of my life, all of my life, I really felt like, I understand that we have a map of process, that we know how, chemicals and, eukaryotes and whatever, all the pieces of the cells interact and what they do and how that can lead to changes and shapes and whatnot. But I always felt like it's just not enough. Random mutations don't really fully explain how we have the form that we do, why we're symmetrical, how our eyes didn't, evolve on opposite sides of our heads, or, there's just all sorts of random stuff that could happen that doesn't happen, that natural selection would not have anything, you know what I mean? And it's just recently that Michael Levin has made all the same points, everything that I was thinking, and it actually led him to discover that electromagnetism has more to do with the development of cells, and collective intelligence has more to do with evolution than DNA does. So my point was just that these people have these absolute rigid beliefs in this paradigm that is limiting and lends itself to manipulation and destruction. And just being open enough to receive the messages from the field, rather than closing ourselves off to all of the universal mind's influence, because that's what happens when you're absolutely certain that it's not there. You lose the ability to interact with it. And so for me, and what I'm trying to offer people is, there is a path that does not require you to abandon reason and common sense and methodology and process. But it still allows for the mysterious and the transcendental, and the really ability to transcend the ordinary, in your imagination and your ability to express your imagination and experiences of the non-ordinary. But you don't want to become so open-minded that wind whistles through your ears. And it's really sad. You guys, if you follow me regularly, and most of you do that come to the live streams, no one that isn't subscribed gets notified about them, I don't think. So it's rare that there are new people in here. But what was I saying? Oh yeah, a recent experience with a friend that I really had high hopes for. He really seemed like someone that had the intelligence and the ability to be open without succumbing to the temptations of woo. Gradually, the woo overrode his common sense, and really, I mean, it snowballed to the point that he's just like a buffoon. I mean, it's just absurd now, believing that there are interdimensional portals just randomly around, and making all kinds of arguments that are just, there's physical proof that they can't possibly be right, and you know what I mean? And the reason I rail so hard against allowing yourself to become that naive and, abandoning respect for your own intellect and those processes, is that we don't want to discourage people from opening their minds. When they see something like that happen to someone, it's just more evidence that, people that think outside of the approved narrative are morons. It's like the flat earthers. It's the same kind of thing, that I've actually suspected that could be a psyop. It was a government propaganda effort, to make people that question the official narrative. And it really seems interesting to me in a bad way that there was sort of an influx in the prevalence of this notion that conspiracy theorists are idiots and flat earthers blowing up, this becoming this huge thing. And there was a whole lot even of anti, that thing that I don't want to say, saying that those people are idiots too before the pandemic hit. Like right ramping up to it, there was like all this sentiment almost as if there was a plan, really, really odd that. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing, you guys. Spiritual bypassing is not a tool. It doesn't help you, and that's really what happened to my friend. It took me a minute to figure it out, but I eventually figured out, he's not super happy in his relationship. His kids aren't like, they don't have any respect for him, all these different elements that he was looking for an escape. And so spirituality becomes a fantasy. It becomes a way to check out of reality. And here's the thing. If you go that route, your progress actually stops. And it doesn't just stop, it actually reverses. So, if you're serious about it, if you want to experience the transcendental in a way that's actually real, you guys have heard my stories, like the stuff that happens if you actually do it instead of, allowing yourself to just believe whatever random crap you read on the internet or whatever it is people do. Popular ideas, I guess people just assume that if millions of people believe something, it must be true or something. And I kind of do the opposite. If millions of people believe something, I assume that it's probably stupid, and I know that sounds maybe egoic or whatever, but I honestly don't care at all. I really don't. It's just true, give absolutely no fucks about that. It's just a fact, that one of the ways that I will determine what narratives are not true and which ones to be suspicious of, like whatever everyone's believing, those are the things to question. Even, Einstein said that, or no, sorry, it was Mark Twain. If you ever find yourself in agreement with the majority, you may want to reevaluate your positions, It's another bit of advice that I can give, and I hate to give advice when I haven't been petitioned. But, I guess you guys are here. So, as Aleister Crowley said, light the society only moves by the light of genius. The herd will be destroyed in mass. What I've noticed is that people tend to look across for their direction. They agree with that, whatever the average person thinks from their demographic. That's got to be the worst practice that I can imagine. What do you guys think geniuses exist for? You know what I mean? If you need to look to someone else to figure out what to think, Aleister Crowley, Aldous Huxley, Robert Anton Wilson, Tesla, Timothy Leary, Terence McKenna, maybe, there's all kinds of absolutely brilliant people of a completely higher order. And you know what else? They tend to agree with each other about almost everything. So, and it doesn't even matter what century they lived in. They perceive the government to be the same way. They perceive the masses to be the same way. And they generally have roughly the same idea of what spirituality is. Something between the religious fairy tale conception of a sky god and the abject materialism of very few scientists, actually. That's another interesting thing, the way the perception is influenced by some hidden hand, in the sense that, almost every major world-changing physicist that I'm aware of died a fucking mystic. You know what I mean? You look at Bohm. Bohm worked with Einstein. Einstein was a bit of a mystic. People try to make him out to be more of a mystic than he was, but he certainly had that element. Bohm and his implicate and explicate order, and the idea that everything is enfolded in everything else, and this holographic idea of reality, right? If the photon is the fundamental basis for the whole of our reality, and it is, because all matter is light in a standing wave, and you cannot grow a walnut from a watermelon seed. That means that the potential that anything can express must be contained in the seed of that thing. And so that means that the photon has everything in every photon. The all is actually in the all, Man, I was on a roll towards somewhere, but I honestly just lost it. Something about the holographic. The idea of the implicate and explicate order, and the photon, and the fact that it's all enfolded into this single eternal thing too. This revelation of light recently has really been blowing my mind. Just the realization that photons are eternal, and it's the only thing in the universe that's eternal, and all the mystical and religious systems all basically aligning, or God or this consciousness, whatever, is light. We have actual answers to this stuff. We're literally figuring out the actual metaphysical reality, the actual sort of spiritual truth of the foundation of the universe, the essence of spirit, the source of consciousness. We actually do have the answers to these questions. You don't have to look into old dusty books. You don't have to believe a guru. You can actually just look at the evidence, and it just is right there for us to see. It is interesting, though, because speaking of not falling for doctrinal systems, it's very biblical in the sense that apocalypse means revelation, and it seems like the veil that conceals all of this stuff is falling away. And, it doesn't just fall away because of some mystical moment. It is a process of the evolution of consciousness and people, certain individuals, developing a new way of thinking, and that happening in tandem with revelations from physics and actual, analysis, structural analysis of the universe and its components. Science and spirituality, of course, totally dovetailing. Everything contains its contradiction, and that includes science, and that includes spirituality. So they are intertwined and not mutually exclusive, and actually dependent upon each other in the same way that good and evil, and male and female, and hot and cold, and all of these other antinomies that aren't really quite opposites, but dualities. the secret stream that I did earlier for my patrons. You guys become patrons if you're not patrons. You can also support us by sending support to the addresses in the chat, and we still have spots open for the retreat, and we're running out of time to fill them. So get in touch with me if you're possibly interested in that. You can come for the last week, the last 2 weeks, whatever it is, but we really need to fill up so that we can move to the ocean, and then you can come see us there as well, probably. That's the idea anyways. I'm becoming more and more motivated to try to start a community, and I don't mean a cult. I'm talking about people becoming interdependent in the sense that we can empower each other. And because there's a certain type of consciousness, there's a certain level of awareness, there's a certain type of person that is extremely uncommon in this world and alienated to an extent that may be irreparable. And so, after trying to interface with the NPCs and to see if we could change them and wake them up or and now that I understand so much more about psychology, I understand that the difficulties are much greater than I believed when I was much younger and more naive. So I'm increasingly of the opinion that all we can really do is join together and create our own bubbles in places in the world like Bali and Ecuador and probably nowhere within the continental United States. So it's another reason to come down here, and see what you think, because if you're living in the United States or Europe, I think when the shit hits the fan, it's not going to be ideal. There's definitely going to be a lot of better places to be. And so I really encourage people to join my Discord so that we can really start networking, figure out who's got what kind of skills, and see what we can do to empower each other. We have to do something meaningful, and we have to do it very quickly, or else what? Exactly. So anyways, you guys, I have to go and watch a movie with the family. I'm very tired. I'm actually kind of sick. Please do hit the like button, share, subscribe, send us millions and millions of dollars so that I can fund the evolution and actually get something done. I just discovered that my brother has finally signed on the papers that will allow my inheritance to move through the courts. It's not huge, but it will allow me probably to overcome the shadow ban and actually have an internet presence, because I'll be able to replace all of my devices and travel a little bit more. And so that's kind of exciting. Yeah, well, to an extent, Gabby. I mean, the emergence into nature, well, yeah, it's true. Down here in the jungle, there's just fruit everywhere. The weather's always tolerable. There aren't so many bugs that it's really nightmarish or anything, even if you're trapped outside. So it really is unbelievably ideal, There's psychedelic plants all over the place. There's medicine everywhere. The only thing we don't have is opium poppies in case of serious injury, but that's easy to fix. You guys, when you come see me, just bring some seeds. Try to get Peshawars. They're one of the high alkaloid cultivars. That's what we need, is Peshawars, maybe bred with gigantiums, so they have larger pods and more resin. But yeah, I mean, South America with opium pop. In fact, opium poppy tea with coca leaves would be like the most amazing thing. Maybe throw some mushrooms in there too. You'd have to go easy on that one, but that would be probably the most amazing thing you could possibly do. So I hope this stream was helpful to you guys. I mean, it's the same message that I always have, but I noticed that people that are even close to me that have made it far down their path sometimes will still manage to get themselves lost. So I feel like some of these things just bear reiteration as often as possible. And so the reality is that, you, before you need to worry about who you were in a past life or what you're going to manifest in the future, you need to come to terms with yourselves in the here and now. Most of the pop culture paradigm and spirituality is about spiritual bypassing. It is tools to evade reality. It is an opportunity to create fantasy, especially the New Age movement. You know, it's just all about creating a bunch of fantasies, the happy thoughts that people want to believe that have absolutely no substance to them, and oftentimes are actually pretty destructive at the end of the day. And the reality is that if you actually do what you're supposed to do and learn basic psychoanalysis and learn maybe the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram or some basic but sophisticated level of meditation, and really set about to remain in dialogue with the mystery and a constant mindfulness, and integrate flow state into your life in some way or another, any way that you can, but some sort of flow state trigger activity in your life, and the right diet. And then you're going to actually be able to see some measurable changes in your reality and in your life and in your consciousness in a meaningful way. Instead of just, having new agey fantasies about, huffing unicorn farts and doing lines of fairy dust or whatever it is that they're doing. So thank you guys so much for spending this time with me, and I'll see you again soon.